94.3 WYBC, the rhythm of the city. I am Wanda Coppage back with you on another Sunday evening for the Electric Drum. Thank you for joining me. This Sunday is a little bit different. I decided to gather the village so that we can speak to the village of those that may be suffering in silence this holiday season and beyond the holiday with mental health, struggling with depression, and all other facets of just anxiety and things that we deal with on a day to day basis. So I have some wonderful people who have agreed to join this conversation with me, four people to be exact. And I would like for them to go ahead and introduce themselves, give a little bit about what they do in your specialty. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my picture with Mr. Kevin Muhammad. How are you, Kevin?
I'm good. I'm good, Wanda. I am a licensed social worker. Right now, I am an LMSW. That will change in a couple months to an CSW. Currently doing clinical hours, seeing clients, therapy. I also work with the men's group. The men's group is I co-facilitate with Brother Yannae, Brother Jay, who is on the panel. I also work as a consultant in early childhood, doing play therapy, behavior plans for children in early childhood. That's in the ages of birth to about 4 years old, and those who have experienced significant trauma, either from home or their environment. So that's basically what I'm doing now.
Wonderful. And thank you for joining us. For those who don't know, myself, LMSW and LCW, I believe that's what you said. What does that stand for? What does that
Well,
represent?
licensed master social worker, and as I take another test, I've finished. I think in the state of Connecticut is 3,000 clinical hours under supervision. I'm then eligible for become a licensed clinical social worker, where I can supervise others and work a little bit more independently, like private practice or something like that.
Awesome. Awesome. Again, thank you for joining us. You are familiar with this brother here, Mr. Yannae Kemp, J.
Of
Kemp.
course,
So
it's
let's
my
go ahead
twin.
and welcome you and introduce yourself, Jay.
Yes, so I am Yannae Kemp. A lot of you know me as J Kemp. I'm a certified wellness coach, SEL educator. And aside from the work that I'm doing with Brother Kevin Muhammad, where we co-facilitate an incredible Black men's group, Black Men Resiliency for GBAT. I'm also I have my own business which works with young adults, whether it's in high school, universities, community programs, and actually doing right now a workshop series in several schools called Show Up Better in Life. And we just address limiting beliefs, creating customized wellness plans, and really focus on transformation from the inside out so they could just show up better and really achieve their goals as their higher self. So, yes. So
I
I'm
love that.
currently, and more importantly than just the labels, I'm also in process of continuously healing and growing as well. So I think that's really important.
I think we all are. So thank you for adding that, Jay.
Yeah.
Yannae. Moving up, Dr. Shannon.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. A.D. Shannon. I am excited to be with you all this afternoon. I'm a practicing licensed psychotherapist. I'm licensed in the state of Connecticut, Virginia, as well as Maryland and pending New Jersey. So I'm the founder of the Naked Truth Life Enrichment Project, where I have my own private practice, but also workshop facilitator, a minister. So my focus when I was in graduate school, focusing on trauma, childhood trauma, looking at resilience to be able to say, once the trauma has occurred, how do we become resilient to decrease those symptomologies, whether it's depression, anxiety, and so forth. So throughout my career, I worked with delinquents, the juvenile court system a little bit, and then the entire lifespan, also on the collegiate level, working at a university doing psychotherapy. So I enjoy what I do. I'm an HBCU graduate, and I'm just glad to be here with everyone. And also a lady of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Nice. And Dr. Shannon, can you tell them the school, the HBCU, just to put it out there?
Yes, Virginia State University, and then
Oh,
also
those
Hampton
Trojans
University.
right there.
Trojan, yes, and also Hampton University, where I received my PhD.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us and joining the conversation.
Thank you.
And then Miss Ricquel Pratt,
Hello,
welcome.
hello, everyone. Again, I am Ricquel Pratt. I've been in education for 15 years. I am a school counselor. I've been a teacher, but now I currently serve as the, excuse me, the dean of students. So I'm the administrator over behavior and curriculum coordinator for our international baccalaureate program. And pretty much, like I said, as a counselor, we've been, I'm working with families. At this time, we have so many kiddos, so many students that are dealing with anxiety and dealing with depression, and so many students that are being misdiagnosed, my Black males, for ADHD when what we're seeing is trauma behaviors. So pretty much what I do is again work with the families, try to find connections and combat the idea of counseling, and things need to be stayed in. If it happens in the home, it stays in the home.
Right.
Combating that and letting them know, hey, we have to actually deal with these traumas so we don't have to deal with that drama. So
Absolutely.
just again, just being that educator, educating from pre-K to the collegiate level. But that's kind of what I do. I'm also a grad of two HBCUs as well. I
Come on,
went to
Ricquel.
Winston-Salem State and undergrad. Go Rams. I went to North Carolina A&T. Go Aggies. And then I went to Southern Connecticut State University as well. And I'm a part of the National Sorority of Phi Delta Kappa. We are a group of educators, Black women, for excellence, and here to help our babies and help our families.
And you are also the youth minister,
I
Christian
am the youth
Tabernacle Baptist
minister.
Church.
I am the youth minister at Christian Tabernacle Baptist Church, where again, not only are we, combating the depressions and the anxieties, but also letting kids know that you are covered, you are anchored, and putting that word in there so we have some substance and they can combat some of the things that we are going through.
Well, I want to welcome you all, and if you're listening, you can see that they are very, very well knowledgeable and qualified to show up and be a part of this conversation. So I want to jump right in. In preparing for this, I checked out a couple of articles, read through a couple of articles, and saw a couple of studies with percentages. And it stated that what we probably already know. Depression, rates for depression are significantly higher during the holiday season than any other time of the year. And it said 55% of Americans are experiencing what they refer to as holiday blues, which shows up in the form of sadness, loneliness, grief from the loss of a loved one, financial stressors, and as many of you have already mentioned, past traumas. So I guess the first place where I would like to start with identifiers. What does it look like for individuals who are experiencing their loved ones? Something may seem a little off. We're not too sure. What are we looking for in identifying what, if any, depression looks like? And I will start where I started with Mr. Kevin, if you're open to answering.
Sure. um, it may show up in a couple of ways. One is there is an actual test or assessment for depression. It's called the PHQ-9, and basically, it's a checklist of some of the things that people have a hard time with. Maybe they have a hard time getting up out of bed. They don't enter into activities that they used to enter into. There's also a mental status exam where you can look at someone and basically, we're trained to kind of tell if somebody's down, if they have a blunt effect, or if their speech is a little bit less focused than usual. The other thing is that there's a fear of missing out. So, people will tend to talk about all of the things that they miss, things that are no longer around. And so it just takes some, listening and looking and to see if people are actually different around this time of the year. And let's not forget that the days are shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I have a therapy lamp right next to me. I keep that next to me because, light and longer days are synonymous with a happier, more not happier, but a little bit more upswing. So it's December, there's a lot going on. There's seasonal depression, there's holiday, the fear of missing out, the loss of a loved one. Sometimes, people are they feel abandoned or isolated, and they'll use that language with you that nobody cares and it's not the same. So there's a lot of things that we could look for. It's basically listening, observing, and also being there for people, validating what they feel.
Nice. Anyone else would like to add to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, and I can come from it from two different angles. One, as a person who actually counsels people, but at the same time, from somebody from a personal experience. You as a person, outside of just knowing the testing and the things that you could observe, just knowing and identifying those that have experienced loss in their life. Just
Mhm.
knowing that there's people in your life that they might have limited family. Myself, the way I grew up, I didn't have much family, so there was many holidays that I had to figure out ways to go through depression, or go through the holiday season and not fall into a deep depression. So I think one way for somebody who has friends or family that they know have had a breakup, maybe have had lost loved ones, maybe not that much family, maybe they're not in state with their family, they're not, their family might be in another country, in another state. I think just to know that
Mhm.
and reach out, and if you want to, and invite them, let them know you're thinking about them. I can say that on the receiving end, it means everything when
Yeah.
somebody does that. On the other hand, for those that are actually experiencing it, one of the things that I knew that really worked for me is, one, identifying the fact that I still have some control here. There's a power that you still have, no matter what mental illness you're dealing with. You do have an ability to be able to take some type of control. One of those things is looking for professional help. I know that's a conversation we can get into, because
Right.
sometimes that could become discouraging. But if you're patient and know that seeking professional help is part of the healing, but
Mhm.
also knowing that start a new tradition. Start a new tradition on holidays, something that you do for yourself. Me, I loved going to Florida because it was sunny, there was warm weather,
Mhm.
and I just had a great time, and I just fed myself, and that self-care is everything. So finding a new tradition, developing a new routine, and getting yourself prepared for when the holidays are coming. So I think on one hand, it's just knowing the power that you have if you're experiencing that. And on the other hand, identifying those that are around you that might be a little bit withdrawn. And if you don't want to go to holiday parties, I can say, don't go. Don't feel the pressure of having to go to the parties and do the events. Keep it light for yourself, and be patient with yourself. I think that's one of the best things that you could do for yourself to avoid a deep depression during the holidays.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jay, because my next question is, you spoke about suffering a loss, grieving, and everyone says the grieving process looks different for everyone. And I know it'll be 5 years in January when I lost my brother. I know, Ricquel, personally, you just went through a loss as well. My condolences.
Thank you.
For me, I was very withdrawn. I didn't want to be in anyone's face, and I didn't want anyone in mine. Get away from me. I don't want to talk. And I don't know if that was healthy for me. So my question is, when you're saying if you don't want to go, don't go, and you're kind of withdrawn, is isolation healthy? What is a healthy boundary from being withdrawn and dealing with the grief, the loss? Dr. Shannon, do you have a response for that?
Yes, I would say one. I think when you think of withdrawn and isolation, I think with Mr. Kemp, what he was saying, it's more so like around like, okay, I don't want to be with family. However, I'm gonna do something else that's pleasurable, right?
Hmm.
I'm not gonna sit in my house and isolate with the blinds closed, with the
Right.
television off. It's
With the
about
sad music.
right. It's find something that brings pleasure and something that you enjoy doing, and doing something that is going to stimulate you emotionally, physically, spiritually, versus putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation that's going to be draining. So I
Okay.
think that's what it looks like. Not so much that you're going to be by yourself, but it's about doing something, even if it's by yourself, that you enjoy doing. So even
Mm.
if you are, alone, you might be in Florida doing something that you may enjoy in Florida when you're not around the traditional table with family and those kind of things. So I think it's more so not so much being by yourself in a state of loneliness, but
Right.
still being able to enjoy your own company. So I
Being
think
And
with yourself rather than
right,
by yourself. Yeah.
right.
and when is it a good time for someone to step in? Again, going back to the grieving, we all go through it differently, and we have our own process. When is it time for family members, loved ones, to say, "All right, this is looking a little different. This is looking like it's going in the wrong direction. We, even though you don't want us here, we have to step in."
I think when you start seeing like behaviors change, right? So, for instance, like if I'm outgoing, if I lose a loved one, I might be sad. That's normal behavior, right? So, I think when it's over extended amount of time, right? So, as a clinician, we look over 6 months, but someone who's not a clinician, they might not know it's at least 6 months. But I think at any stage, if anyone suffers a loss, you should talk to someone, right? It doesn't even matter if it's like, because some people know how to mask their emotions. So they
Right.
might not show you that they're grieving and they're having a hard time. They might put on a mask and show in front of you that they're doing well, but inside they could not, their insides isn't demonstrating what their insides are feeling. So what I would recommend that anyone give someone, a loved one who lost someone, and say, listen, maybe you should talk to someone, because a loss, you know, there's different stages. They might be in a denial stage and you may not know that they're in a denial stage. So I would say suggest that anytime to encourage a loved one to say, listen, maybe you should process this, with someone, even if you don't identify the particular the signs of isolation, or they're not eating or binge eating, because you don't know what happens when they go home.
Right. And Raquel, I see you. Thank you, Dr. Shannon, for that. And
Yeah.
also Mr. Kemp. Raquel, I see you shaking your head. Did you want to add to that?
Yes, it's a whole bunch. We all said some great stuff. But say, just going to something different as far as like depression. One, we do have that control. So going back to Mr. Kemp, when he was saying pretty much, if you want to be by yourself, it's okay to be by yourself. But again, don't sit there. Don't, sometimes we have to pull ourselves out of that. And I'm saying us because we all probably been there, but we have to pull ourselves out of that depression. And we have to remember that we are in control over us, and we can't let depression control us.
Mhm.
And with communication, and it's hard. I know sometimes, especially when people lose someone, you're like, I don't really know what to say to them. But sometimes just having a conversation, it can be about anything, but having that communication and that conversation. I know, like a lot of people, you throw counseling at them, they're like, wait, no, I'm not, nothing wrong with me. I'm just feeling a little sad today. But I feel like just having that open conversation and being comfortable with that. And then eventually, saying, hey, bringing them some resources, not just saying, hey, you need to go to counseling, but bring them some resources, give them some sites, give them some counseling, give them some tools to do. Hey, when you're feeling, a little down, I know you may feel down, but these are some things that you can do. Find a hobby, read a book. Some of go to a painting class,
Right.
go take yourself out to dinner. Simple as that. But it's important to actually do. It's important to keep yourself going, because depression is real. It's something that that's true, and that can take over if we allow it to take over. And another thing with depression, I know we're talking about pulling away and being lonely, but another sign of depression, again, is when that behavior is switching, and when our kids who are usually quiet or straight, they rowdy, or they have this extreme shift. So when our kiddos, because it's not necessarily that they may go into their room or they may cry, but they may, have impulsivity. They may start showing, because that's something that they're in control of, their behavior, because there's so many things that our kiddos can't really control, but they can control that piece, and they can get that reaction out of whatever it is that they need to let go, because again, that self-regulation, they may not have the skills for that. And I do think and I'm going back to the kids because that's my specialty, is the
Yes.
kiddos.
That's what I was going to ask you. So I'm glad you're answering. Yes.
But I think it's important for our families to take that initiative, to model that behavior, model how we go through things. I know a lot of people, they say, okay, we handle it in closed doors, and the parents may go through, let your kids kind of see how you problem solve, how you get through, how you deal with that conflict, because they don't know. And at home, I always say that's the first teacher. They're looking at you and they're seeing how you deal with things. So allow them that time to express. Because I know a lot of times it's, we don't talk. Or no, you can't. Let them talk. See where they're
Yeah.
going. And it may be out there, but we know how to bring it back in or have that conversation to bring it back in and help them see the realities and how to decipher through their feelings. So I feel like that needs to be taught. And I'm gonna say this because it's in my head, but I work with, again, I said pre-K to college level. So I was actually working with a pre-K student. He was 4 years old, and something happened out on the playground. He got hurt, and he jumped up real quick. A black male student. He jumped up real quick, and he kind of got tough. And I'm like, oh shoot, like you can cry, it's okay. And he said, he was like, Miss Ricquel, boys don't cry. And I was like, oh, that boy don't cry. Who's telling him that this boy don't cry? Because he's going to be a man that grows up and feels like he can't express and he can't emote and he can't, talk. So we need to combat that. Like, as far as it's okay to feel.
So
I really want to touch on the youth, only because I as well work with young adults in the college. I've been working with teens for over 16 years. And one of the things that I know is really serious is social media comparison is very much a silent virus to our mental health. And the fact is, suicide is the third leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-old Americans. So what that's telling us is our young people are not only experiencing trauma, but having to grow up without the tools to really process and heal from trauma. And we have to really prioritize our young people, because trauma not healed is trauma transferred. So we need to be sure our young people develop those critical thinking skills so they can process all that's going on in society on the internet, but also the social emotional intelligence to be able to process and heal, so we can really, if we're working with this generation, we're working with the next generation to come. So I really love that Ricquel, that you brought that up, because our young people, it's a priority that we teach social emotional learning development and how to process this trauma, even when they're 4 years old, 3 years old. As soon as they learn how to speak, I feel they should be learning that.
The other thing, Wanda, is something that Ricquel said that really hit the nail on the head. Is our voice is really the voice that we got from our parents, our inner voice. And we're constantly talking to ourselves all the time. And so in clinical work, the job is a lot of times to get people to understand what they are saying to themselves, which is difficult at times, but sometimes the constant dialogue, inner dialogue, is causing the depression or the anxiety. And it starts at a very young age. And so one of the things that we just talked about is during the holiday season is to interject. Sometimes to interject and let a person know, you're not alone. I'm here for you. Sometimes we don't have to say anything, just have presence, just to show up. And let people know that, to break up some of that dialogue and to look at things a little differently, another perspective. And I also thought about the fact that family doesn't look the same for everyone. And so it's interesting that we may not have certain members of the family, but there are others out there that can become our family. And so to teach the ability for people to have connection. And I think it's not so much that it's maybe the cousin that we don't get along with or the aunt, are we connected to somebody? Do we feel connected? And even though we're going through a very difficult time, there may be someone that resembles the sister that we're connected to, or resembles the brother. And that person just reminds us that, we're not alone.
So all great points. And I kind of want to expand on this a little bit when it comes to parenting, or just someone in your village that you feel comfortable with to speak. I'm a parent I believe most of us are parents here. We have little ones. How do we, this whole gentle parenting thing, there's a fine line between, gentle parenting and stop playing with me. But how do we provide that safe environment for our children? Because as you just mentioned, it starts when we are young, and our parents teach us. What do we do? What are the tools? And anyone can respond to this, for parents listening, to provide that safe space, to have that place where their children can come and talk to them first.
I think just as a father of an amazing 9-year-old daughter who, I mean, her social emotional intelligence is incredible. And I think her mother and I would both agree that we created this space very early
Mhm.
for her to know, such as Ricquel said, when I'm upset or when I'm sad or when I'm processing something, this is something I was conversing with her very early, not too much to where it was a bunch of pressure on her. This wasn't to project anything onto her. It was to create a space where we can talk about something and she could also express something. So even at 9 years old, she is open to articulate herself. One of the things she can't stand that I ask her all the time is, do you feel seen? Do you feel heard?
Oh,
Do
I
you feel
love that.
loved? And she's like, oh, yes, Dad. She's gonna love it later. But we created this space when she was so little. I mean, probably around 2, 3 years old. So these conversations are very normal. And I think this is where you kind of find the balance between gentle and firm. Because
Right.
when I'm not playing, but I can communicate that to you and you know the severity of it
Right.
because I'm open about it. I don't have to raise my voice too much. I don't have to cuss or throw something. This is something I'm communicating with you, and on a social emotional learning level, you understand that. So I think creating this dialogue very early and not being afraid as an adult to speak with a young person, because the fact is, such as what Kev said, we still have the child in us, and
Yes.
our child is either screaming or our inner child is crying or happy or sad. And I think it's important to know that that inner child can talk with the child that we have, and we can have this dialogue. So I think the communication starts very early. And if you didn't start early, it's never too late to start it and create that culture within your family.
Because
Right.
I would say growing up, we we didn't always get that from our parents. It
Mm.
was don't talk back, stay in a child's
Right.
place, which it stops the conversation before it even starts. So the fact
Mm.
that you're doing that with your daughter, I think is incredible. I believe it was Ricquel or Dr. Shannon. I'm not sure. One of you wanted to say something.
Yeah, what I was gonna say was also is knowing the personality of your child, right?
Mhm.
So I think also like like at an early age, also knowing their personality. If they're talkative, if they're not as talkative, meet them where they are. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of times parents want to shape you. I mean, you do shape their character. However, most of the time they're born with their own personality. So it's vitally important that you meet them where they are in their personality and come to their spaces, and letting your kids know this is what upset looks like. This is when I'm disappointed. This is when I'm disciplined, right? Because sometimes for kids it's hard to understand. So if I've been hurt at school, I'm afraid to go to you because I might think I'm getting your disappointment mixed up with your discipline. So I might
Mhm.
not tell you because I might be afraid that you're going to discipline me based on what I might tell you, right? So I think it's vitally important for parents taking time, which our parents probably didn't, to cultivate and understanding our personality and
Yes,
being able to articulate it, because kids know more than what we think they know,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
right? It's just giving them opportunity to share that. And like starting at the womb, right? They feel, you communicate with
Mhm.
them at the womb when they're
Yeah.
one, when they're two, and opening up and letting them know, mommy's not going to be sad if somebody does something to you with you. I think that conversation is important because kids want to protect their parents. They don't realize, no, parents protects their kids.
Right. Raquel?
And one thing is when we have that communication and we open up that communication with our kids, we also need to realize something, like I said, and I think I said it before, but some of the things that they say, we might be upset, we might feel some type of way about it, but the way we handle that, if we come at them as disciplinarians,
Mhm.
they're going to shut off, and then they're going to start seeking their friends, seeking other people to confide in, because not adults, they go to their friends,
Yes.
who don't know much more, but they'll go to their friends for that validation or that help that they're
Right.
looking for. So when they do come to us, and tell us what's going on, we have to check our emotions and check how we
Yes.
respond to our kids, because the way we respond, that's going to share if
Right.
they're coming back, or if we're sending them out to the world to handle whatever. So
That's real.
we have to check ourselves
That's
first
real.
before
'Cause
we
internally, my daughter could say something, and I'm like, "Oh, really?" But internally, I'm like, "Ah!"
So the other thing is that Raquel said something about the young man, that he stood up and he said boys aren't supposed to cry.
Yep.
One of the things that Jay and I work with the adult men, and
Mm-hmm.
we have brothers in our group that range from 19 to 80.
Yeah.
So is one of the things is that there's the tough work. You lift weights, you go to the gym, but nobody has more PTSD or post-traumatic stress than the tough guys, the guys
Mm.
that
Right.
went to the military, the guys that were out in the street. And so they don't heal unless they become vulnerable. So the ability to understand that there's a time for us to show up on a sports field or basketball field, and then having that conversation, we know how to process our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to mention that the discussion that we have with our children a lot of times at a young age, like we've all been talking about, is the ability to identify what they're feeling. Are they scared? Are they sad? I've seen young children come to therapy and learn
Mm-hmm.
those types of skills with some of our brothers that come at 20, 30 haven't learned yet to
Yeah.
identify yet what they're feeling, what's going on internally, so they can process and address it. Having no issue, a 4 or 5-year-old saying, you know what, I feel kind of sad today and I didn't like what you did. I'm
Right.
angry. Let's talk
Mm.
about it. Let's
I love
process it.
that.
And so they become adults that are a little bit more in tune with what's going on inside of them, processing their emotions, healing themselves, and then going about the business and being able to connect with others. And I think those skills now, and this is why social emotional learning is something in this environment, especially after COVID, that's being taught all over this nation. And
Absolutely.
and it's a skill that we all can learn no matter what age we are.
And what I noticed, just to piggyback off of what Kev said of working with men, what I noticed with these men who are 50, 60, 70 years old, when they begin to heal that inner child, the inner child comes out. So now there's this new exploration as a child to say, what do I want to do with life now? Now that I'm this healed self and I'm walking in this higher self, what do I want to do? Maybe I'll go travel. Maybe I'll go do this. I'm going to stop doing this.
Yeah.
They start to find these new discoveries as we did when we were children. We all explored, we all discovered. And at some point, we feel like we got too smart, too adultish to say that we still need to explore and discover more about ourselves. And there's
Mercy.
nothing more greater than finding a new you, finding a new healed version of you. And what I noticed with the men, as they heal, we don't just go from, okay, how are you going to heal and restore, but how are you going to heal and restore? And now, what innovative thing can you do? What new creative thing will you be? And we should maybe start moving the conversation of Black men alone healing and restoring to how else can we now create more talents, more innovators, and how can we get more Black men such as Kev and myself to become licensed therapists, where a lot of Black men have a mistrust for the medical field, and we only want same race psychologists,
Yeah.
who unfortunately it's still very slim in the workforce. So I really love when I see the healing of men's inner child, and now that inner child begins to show up in life. It's a beautiful thing.
I really love how everything I have on my list to talk about is already just coming out in the conversation very naturally. So this is wonderful. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to WYBC, The Electric Drum. We are having the conversation around mental health awareness. And Kevin, you just said some pretty powerful words speaking to two of the topics that I want to get on. But how do we erase the stigma attached to going to therapy for Black men, for families in general? But since we're speaking about men, let's start there. How do we get more men going into counseling and therapy?
I think they have to show, you have to see Black men. Most of my clients that I see, I specialize in boys and men. And one of the things that Jay and I do is we have these forums, we have these discussions that don't quite sound like therapy.
Mm-hmm.
They're just day of healing. They're events on showing up. How to into me you see. That was one of our events when we talked about what is intimacy with ourselves before we have intimacy with anyone else. So
Mm.
finding ways that we can engage men where they are and then having the conversation. And most of the brothers, when we do get to those groups, they end up opening up.
Yeah.
And a couple of them will say, I do need one-on-one therapy, brother. Will you come? I mean, will you be there for me? And I'll either see you virtually or in person. But I just think it's engaging them where they are and just having conversation.
So I'll just piggyback off of that. The spaces that can be created for men to be vulnerable are so imperative and are a bridge for men to seek professional help.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just trauma bond. We don't just sit around talking about our traumas. Brother Kevin and I work we make a concerted effort to be sure that we are bringing brothers from one place to and evolving to a higher place within themselves and them doing that work. And so spaces for brothers to be vulnerable with other brothers is so important because we're often overlooked in regards to the stress we deal with, in regards to the emotional pain we deal with, the pressure that we deal with. So it really has been beneficial for so many men in our group, and not just here in Connecticut, but
Right.
any brother that's listening. If you can create a space of healing and having these conversations of doing this work wherever you are, 4 or 5, 6 brothers, it is so beneficial for more and more men to normalize vulnerability with each other and seek professional help.
Absolutely. And Dr. Shannon and Raquel, do you want to add to that?
No, I just think, well, I'll just add like it was already stated, when they see that there's other folks that looks like them, especially that are mental health providers, they're more likely to buy in. I do a lot of work with Emerge in New Haven with Black men.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've heard from a lot of the men, knowing that there's other men that look like them that provide these services. So basically just being out in the community and knowing that they have a safe space.
And would you say that's the same for everyone collectively, the
Yeah,
family in general?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm on Black Therapy for Black Girls. I get a lot of requests saying, it's difficult to find women of color providing services. So definitely people want to be able to see somebody that looks like them. Not that we have the same exact experience, but
Right.
there may be some similarities.
Yeah. I think also it was the APA. The APA gave us statistics in 2021 that
Mm-hmm.
said more than any other group, Black men do seek um, intervention. They do seek counseling, but it becomes very difficult when they can't find someone that's culturally relevant
Right.
to their needs, and they tend to give up a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So sometimes having, I'm in social work, and when you see social work classes, graduation classes, I remember it was just me and another brother looking
Right.
at each other like we got to spread it out because there's only 2 of us. So
Yep.
somehow there has to be more
Right.
men that are inclined towards the field of healing. I call it healing. Others call it mental health,
Mm-hmm.
clinical work. I just think that there needs to be more of us so that we can attract more of us.
Yeah, I agree.
My question off of what you mentioned, Kevin. COVID. COVID came, changed everything. We're all isolated. We're all in the house. Uh,
Mm.
we're losing social skills. It's affecting the children. Would you say, how do we navigate around what COVID has done to us mentally? That's the question. And anyone can jump in,
Um,
emotionally and mentally.
I mean, definitely, I think from working with folks who've experienced trauma, a lot of individuals had to go back in that trauma space and they weren't able to get out of that trauma space, especially children. They were experiencing abuse at home. When
Hmm.
they were going to school, at least they had some time out of that space if it was abuse that was unspoken. But now that they were back in that space, whether it was witnessing domestic violence, that they're the victim of violence, that definitely caused numbers of depression to increase as well as anxiety because even adult women, if they were home with their spouse, whether it's male, female, experiencing some sort of trauma, they were back in that space and they didn't have an out. So I definitely saw that the numbers definitely increased as it relates to mental illness, mental health around trauma during COVID.
And I know one thing the schools are doing now is trying to make sure not only the counselors, but the social emotional learning is happening and trauma informed. They're actually workshops for our teachers to make sure our teachers are able to identify it and have strategies to actually work through that or refer students and giving them resource on what to do. But just like you just stated, like they were in there, they were, back in that environment and they could not escape. They were stuck there. So as far as like the depression and anxiety and just being off with that regulation, so now it's where I feel like all of us were kind of in there trying to, not only help what was there, but those deficits,
Right.
they're widened that we're sitting, and that's why it's so important. I feel like so many people are like, no, we don't need any counseling, or it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to help. And like we stated, they do want someone that can identify with them and look like them, but I feel like they don't know where to go.
Right.
So we got to make sure that we're providing that education and those resources for our families. And some say, okay, well, finances. Well, we have ways that we can work around that. So let's talk about that. But they don't know the resources that are out there for them. So that's part of the battle there.
Yeah, and for some of the young people that I'm working with now, they went from COVID when they were 14, and then 16 years old, they're in high school, and it's already about college is coming. What are you going to do? And they're dealing with the pressure of now of like, wait, I don't know if I was even a kid yet. I was already dealing with this. Now I'm in school. You're telling me I have to think about college, and there's already the fear of that. So, and I think for staff as well, for a lot of staff that I work with, them being able to process even things that they're dealing with, so they show up for our young people the best way they could show up, so they could be completely present for our young people. Social emotional learning, I think, is so key, and also ensuring that they have access, because there are a lot of racial disparities within mental health, where there's not enough access. And I think, Ricquel, I think you mentioned a misdiagnosis. That also is happening on a high scale, especially with Black men. So I think for educators and for people who are in the field to be sure that everybody knows that they have access and ways to mental health. It doesn't mean you have to have a whole lot of money to have a therapist.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, one of the things that I know that I've been looking into, and there's a lot of research on it now, is, repressing what we're feeling. Even historically, they say that with women, because they were not allowed in many instances politically or whatever to express themselves, that they've even traced that to autoimmune diseases and the rising of lupus and everything else, because when you don't express yourself and you repress, all of those emotions create havoc within the body. There's even this idea that the body keets the score.
That's right.
But also for people that are oppressed and Black and have not had a chance, and when we are expressing our anger, people tell us not to get so angry. And think about a 1-year-old child. Who tells a 1-year-old child not to cry or not to get? They're free to express themselves. But when a child is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that anger, that ability to express themselves, we don't give room.
Right.
And so they've learned all kinds of ways to express themselves and act out, because we don't have a culture of people being able to express themselves first and finding a healthy space. And I think, before we can get out of COVID, it's back to standardized testing. I was an educator for many, many years in the school system, and it's just, there's a lot of people just not expressing what they're feeling and what's on their minds, from the administrators to the teachers to the children. And so it creates an environment of repression and unhealthiness. And we've got to find a way to give room, safe space. We call it, as my brother Jay and I, sacred and safe space. And for the men, just to add, we had to have us. We started online with women. We noticed that the men weren't really expressing themselves as much as they could have. So we needed a space just for the men, especially black men, to express themselves and feel safe. And the first line of anything is to make sure that when they express themselves, they're heard and they feel safe. And that's what we have to create.
Thank you for that, Kevin. I want to go to Dr. Shannon because even in your email, we spoke about this and we're talking about expression and not keeping this bottled up inside. We're in the holiday season where we're spending a lot of time, if we choose to, around family. And sometimes some of that past trauma comes from family and family members and people who have experienced abuse that they are not talking about, acting as if it never happened, but still having to show up and be around these family members. Dr. Shannon, if you could take a moment in this time to just speak to someone who may be going through that and give some words of encouragement or advice. What do we do in that situation?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think one, the most challenging thing is most victims feel guilty, right? So they feel guilty that they don't have a desire to show up to family functions. They feel guilty um that they didn't tell, a lot of guilt. So what I would say to someone who have experienced any kind of trauma, and whether it's sexual, physical, emotional, or even if they is vicarious trauma. So say if they didn't experience the trauma, but they know about the trauma and they don't want to be around the perpetrator, it's okay to not put yourself in any compromising situation that causes discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times victims feel guilty. Like, I have to be there. I have to show up and put on a mask when I'm there. And they're miserable. So they're suffering silently. And I work with a lot of folks who during the holidays, they don't look forward to going home for Thanksgiving or Christmas because a cousin's going to be there, uncle's going to be there, some family, a father's going to be there, right? A mother's going to be there who they've experienced the abuse from. So letting them know it's okay. And like I think someone already stated before, to build your own community. So you're not alone, right? You could find an auntie that's safe, or a family member, or anyone, as we build community in our churches and or the other organizations, right? To be able to still have family, even if it's not your biological family. So I just want to say to anyone, don't feel guilty if you don't want to show up. It's okay. And I think that starts the healing process when one is able to say, this is my truth. This is my naked truth. And this is how I feel. And like, with the autoimmune disease, I've done a lot of research. When we don't deal with trauma, it manifests in our immune system, in the physical man. It comes out. It's going to come out, right?
Yeah.
So being, that's when we feel anxious, right? And then you start feeling your joints lock up because of those things we haven't dealt with and we kept inside. So anyone, I'm an advocate of walking in your truth and to thy own self be true, and creating community and being able to sit around someone else's dinner table and say, this is my family, and it's okay.
I just wanted to add on, since when we talk about what shows up in the body, and I think when it comes to mental health, I think it's important for us to keep in mind that we need mental health care teams. So it's not just what we do for the mind, but it's also what we do for the body. So there's wellness plans, a lot of things that I do of habit transformation and being able to find ways to get active. Sometimes we focus so much on these training regimens and a 6-pack by the end of the year. Like, let's just focus on being active and moving the body so we can release that trauma that's stored in there. So when we think about mental health, think about the whole wraparound transformational service that's needed for that.
This conversation has been so wonderful. When in radio, Jay, we only have a limited amount of time. So we can't go for 2 hours, even though we can. But to bring the conversation to a close, I know, Kevin, you spoke before about just adding a little bit of light to the room can perk you up just a bit. I want to go to each of you before we wrap up. And if you could just give something that we can do in the moment to make us feel better, just for the moment. We start small and build up. So you already gave us the light, but do you have something else that you want to add, Kevin?
I know Kev's going to take mine.
Now, I think we just have to get present and speak where we are. If you're not at the same place at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, just say, I feel run down and tired. It's 2 p.m. But even if you felt great at 10 or 12, I think giving yourself room to just express where you are presently, and even more so telling somebody that's non-judgmental so you can be vulnerable, whether it's a good friend, whether it's a therapist. Just my thing is just expressing where you are. Don't hide from that.
I
Yeah.
love it.
I
Jay?
just want
I would say, this is always overlooked. It's underestimated, but breath.
yep.
Mm,
Breath heals. Breath gives you energy. Breath does so much so taking that moment to be with yourself, be with every feeling you have. Don't be attached to the emotion. Observe the emotion and breathe. It's one of the best things you could do in the moment.
I love it.
Absolutely.
And we're going to go to Dr. Shannon and then end off with Ricquel.
Okay, I would just say give yourself grace.
Mm,
As you breathe, as you do everything else, give yourself grace and be in the moment and just give yourself to say, okay, I had a moment, so let me get back on track, and give yourself grace.
mhm.
Nice.
And I feel like we're all taking that pause. And so that's what I want to say is pause,
mm,
breathe. You're not perfect. You're
mm.
not expected to be perfect. The world may expect you to be perfect, but you are what you are in that moment. So again, that grace, pausing and breathing.
Yes.
And I am not a healthcare professional, but I am a music girl. So I'm going to say take a minute to step away and turn on the radio, that
There
good
you go.
song to feel good. Music gives you feel good vibes.
Yes, it
It
does.
just does.
YBC though. Don't
Come,
put on. Don't put
come
on.
on, Jay. You already know.
Music to put on.
Well, whatever music makes you feel good in that moment, that's what you rock with because it works for me just to share that with you. I want to thank all of you for being a
Thank
part
you.
of this conversation. I feel like we need a part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So maybe we'll do that a little bit later. We'll schedule that. But thank you for taking the time for doing this. If you are someone who's struggling, you need someone to talk to. You have these professionals here. You can reach out to someone else. But let's do that. Let's give contact info so someone can reach out to you. Kevin, let's start with you again.
Yes. So I am working as a consultant through GBAP, where I do my clinical work. I can be reached at K Muhhamad at gbapp.org. That's KMUHAMMAD at gbapp.org. My number is 203-360-2818. That's 203-360-2818.
Thank you. Yannae?
Yes, you could reach me at www.ytkservices.com. Also, my number is 203-397-6022.
Dr. Shannon?
Yes, I can be reached at, if you go on Psychology Today, type in Dr. AD Shannon, AD Shannon, if you remember, whatever you remember, you can type in, I'll come up on Psychology Today, Therapy for Black Girls. If you just Google, if you may forget that, you could just type in my name and I should come up on Google as well.
Awesome. And Miss Pratt?
All right. So my number is 336-577-9073. You can call Christian Tabernacle Baptist Church. You can give them a call, let them know you want to speak to Youth Minister Ricquel Pratt. My emails are dpratt28@gmail.com. Or you can just come by on Sunday, stop by Christian Tab. We'll be right there, right in Hampton.
I love that. Listen, you have it locked to the rhythm of the city, 94.3 WYBC. Whomever you choose to talk to, just talk to someone. You do not have to suffer in silence, and you definitely do not have to suffer alone. We are here for you as a community. Make sure you keep it locked. You have more holiday music coming in after we wrap this up. And please make sure you check out the video. It will be posted for you on my Facebook page and YouTube channel. My name is Wanda Coppage. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and be blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you.